na kuna mawe, hiyo mnadanganya. Kwa kuna chuma na kuna rungu, siwezi na mkono hivi.
We need justice for Albert Ojwang.
Yeah.
Hatutoki streets. Hata mkifanya nini? Hata mkileta your goons. We are ready for that. Today is today. Tuesday ni Tuesday. Tunataka justice. Kuna waasha.
Hiyo ni kali. Hiyo sasa ni noma sana.
Ini mpya.
Hii ni mpya jo. Guys, subscribe to Balindwe Media. This is Tuesday 17. Tumekuja kukava maandamano live.
Live, Rob and in case, good morning Kenya. Wake up with Good Morning Kenya, the morning show that's got it all.
We dive deep into issues shaping our country.
You are a voice of a nation.
What is the next step
Protesters
for
have also
the
made their way out of this
Unpacking
strange
political landscape from Monday to Wednesday.
We discuss family matters.
It is very important to guard your relationship.
And for your health,
Someone doesn't wake up and they become an addict. It's in stages.
we've got you covered each and every Tuesday at 9 a.m.
Every Wednesday, it's all about the viewpoint.
A day in politics is like 1,000 years.
Unpacking the biggest stories of the week, getting you insights and getting you ready for your day.
And the package is not yet done. I get to fix your Thursday with some entertainment too. Try nice and lovely lemon lotion.
It's getting a bit messy. We don't know whether this particular situation it continues to be a game of cat and mouse, but like I said, these are protests in relation to the death of Albert Ojwang, who doesn't police custody. So today the Deputy Inspector General of Police, Ali Lagat, stepping aside, saying his duties will now be officially taken over by his deputy until investigations are completed. You can see just police officers here calling on counterparts to reduce the use of police, tear gas canisters. Protesters are already, somewhat disciplined now. Heavy confidence of police officers now. We all know that continue. And also saw the father of Ojwang yesterday saying that indeed the president continue. Of course, it was the president for taking that initiative to call him. Of course, that is not something that we with Gen-Zs and activists. That is what has led to these particular protests. As well, remember this is the month that we are marking 1 year since the June-July wave of demonstrations. There will be commemorations, and of course, the human rights activists, as well as including former Chief Justice David Maraga, are planning to have commemorations marking 1 year since the deadly June 25th demonstrations right here in Nairobi. Lives and of course, these particular demonstrations are expected to culminate on the 25th of June, even as our calls for transparency and accountability continue to rent the air amid, of course, ongoing investigations. IPOA has been on the spot in regards to the slow pace of investigations into the death of those particular individuals who lost their lives during those particular protests. And stones are now being pelted our way by the protesters as we try and scamper for safety just a little bit as information gets a chance.
Na mtazamaji, huyo ni Ian Ketani, sauti yake hiyo unaipata akituelezea kuhusu maandamano haya ya vijana kupinga na kukashifu ukatili wa maafisa wa polisi, hasa tunapozungumzia kuhusu mauaji ya Albert Ojwang, mauaji ambayo yalifanyika katika seli za kituo cha polisi cha Central hapa jijini Nairobi. Na kama unavyoona kwenye kiwango cha runinga yako, picha za moja kwa moja hizi katika barabara hii ambayo hali utulivu kwa sasa inashuhudiwa, lakini katika dakika 10 hivi zilizopita tumeona hali ya mshike mchezo wa paka na panya kati ya waandamanaji na maafisa wa polisi. Lakini kinachoshangaza zaidi ni kwamba tumeona vijana ambao wamebeba marungu, na hali inapozidi ama hali inapokuwa ngumu zaidi tunawaona wanaelekea upande wa maafisa wa polisi. Bwana Shadrack Wambui, wewe ni wakili katika hali kama hii, tunapozungumzia maandamano ya amani, tumeona vijana awali walikuwa katika hali ya utulivu wakitembea katikati mwa barabara hizi za Nairobi, kisha baadaye tukaona maafisa wa polisi wakitumia vitoa machozi, kisha tena tukaona vijana ambao wamebeba marungu wakishirikiana na maafisa wa polisi kutuliza hali. Kisheria hili limewekwa?
Naam, ukizingatia kipengele cha 37 cha katiba, na katiba inapendekeza kwamba sisi wote tuna haki ya kuandamana, lakini haki ile ya kuandamana ni haki ambayo iko na kikomo. Kikomo ni kumaanisha kwamba si absolute, kwamba kuna hali ambayo unaweza kuwa ukiandamana ambayo haiambatani na katiba. Mwanzo kuna ile kama unaandamana lazima uandamane bila silaha.
Ndio hawa hapo unaona kwenye kiwango cha
lazima iwe ya amani. Kwa hivyo hawa na ninaona wako karibu sana na wako na uhusiano wa karibu sana na mapolisi. Kwa hivyo ni mambo ambayo naona ni kama yamepangwa ili kuweza kutawanisha waandamanaji ambao wanaandamana kwa amani na kwa kuzingatia vitu fulani. Unaona wamebeba silaha. Hii hairuhusiwi. Hawa ndio watu ambao polisi wanafaa kuenda kushika, kuwatia mbaroni na kuwachukulia hatua. Lakini unavyoona ya kwamba kuna uhusiano wa karibu sana baina ya watu ambao wamebeba mafimbo au marungu na hawa polisi ambao wanafaa kawaida kuwalinda waandamanaji dhidi ya watu kama hawa.
Ni sawa kusema kwamba wanafanya kazi kwa agizo na amri kutoka kwa kiongozi fulani?
Si sawa, lakini inaonekana ya kwamba unajua mwenye macho ambiwi tazama. Kwa kweli ni kwamba inaonekana ni kana kwamba hawa waandamanaji ambao wamebeba silaha au unaona wakiwaashiria wengine waje ili waweze kuzoa pengine vurugu ama vita. Ni kumaanisha ya kwamba kuna wale hawa polisi wamepokea pengine maelekezo ama muongozo kutoka mahali fulani, wakaambiwa ya kwamba waweze kuwatuliza watu ambao wanaandamana kwa amani kwa kuwafukuza. Angalia. Hii mambo haya ni mambo mabaya sana, kwa sababu hii ni kugonganisha vijana na kwa vijana. Na sisi wote tunafaa kuwa kwa safari moja ya kukomboa jamhuri letu la Kenya.
Kwa payroll.
Na tuliona haya mwaka jana wakati wa maandamano ya vijana wa Gen Z dhidi ya mswada wa fedha wa mwaka 2024, na pia hii leo katika picha ambazo pengine utazipata baadaye hapa ndani ya K24, tuliwaona wahudumu wa bodaboda ambao walikuwa wamebeba mabango ambayo yameandikwa no maandamano. Na mwaka jana pia hili lilifanyika wakati wa maandamano yale ya vijana wa Gen Z, tukaona wahudumu wa bodaboda ambao walidaiwa kulipwa na viongozi mbalimbali kuzima maandamano ya vijana, pia wakijitosa katikati mwa jiji la Nairobi kukabiliana na waandamanaji. Na hili
Tuesday on the Gen Z manifesto, manzetu tunaongelea police brutality.
Wafunge kila mahali.
Go.
Umenivunja mkono, umeniua, kwa nini uniue?
This Wednesday on the People Dialogue, are Kenyans safe? Are you safe? Is the country experiencing an aggressive return?
haki na katiba imetuchunga, unaona. Kama tuogopi hizo serikali za mabdakta kuua watu, wanatuma mpaka watu kware, wanaleta machoka jana wadogo kwa haki yao, wanalipa wazazi ya milioni 2 ndio mzazi ya nyamaza. Nadhani mtalipa wazazi wetu sisi nyamaza. Hatuna our parents we will defy anybody who supports, even the preachers who support, we will defy them. Unaelewa? Kila mtu mwenye anakusupport, mwenye anajua wewe tunafight, makara wale maroon policemen tunawafight, unaona? Media yenye inapromote bado tunaifight, unaona? Wale magavana wanalipa watu wanalipa watu, wanapatia watu mandudu bado wao tunawafight, unaona? So sisi wa youth tunapigania haki na tunataka Kenya kuichukua ile mbele, unaona?
Sakaja amelipa vijana tunajua tuko ready ndio mmoja vijana Sakaja amelipa kwa uoga. Sakaja acha kuharibu Sakaja unalipa vijana waoga. Sakaja unalipa mabosi waoga. Tunawakojea Sakaja unalipa vijana waoga.
Wasichana wameingia huko watapigwa bure. Ndio tupande. Oya. Makasia. Angalia rende huko.
Jackie bro. Ukaa karibu na polisi mtaa moja.
Hapana, huku. Hao watu wako na makelele. Ukikaa hapa kazi ajabu ni guys content. Kia kazi kipigo, hiyo content haiko. Unaingia hapa kidogo, watu wanapiga makelele nini unajitoa unaingia huko.
Oya. Aye, bro, chunga hiyo mawe isikuje kwako. Hii hapa.
mtu ameanguka huko. Tulia, simama tu, tulia pressure. Bro, kimwaka sana kweli. Twende chini. Twende saidi ya juu. Jamaa anagonga hapa. Ani magunza. Pikipiki na kama.
kaunti yetu ya Nairobi. Kaunti yetu ya Nairobi inaharibiwa vitu, dustbin zinaharibiwa, vitu za dhamana zinaharibiwa, biashara inaharibiwa. Tumejitolea kama wananchi kusema kwamba maandamano haina haja, maana serikali ni moja, upinzani na serikali wanafanya kazi pamoja. Kwa hivyo mimi mwenyewe sioni haja ya mtu kufanya maandamano town na kuharibu economy ya Kenya. Economy ya hii nchi iko mahali pabaya, na sisi kama wananchi tunaomba ya kwamba watu watulie, serikali iko pamoja, tumpatie president nafasi aweze kufanya kazi. Shukrani.
Tuko side mbaya. Bro, hapa lazima kwetu za na mazoezi. Msiende hivi, Jumaa zinatoka kutoka huko chini. Confuse wote wenyewe kwa wenyewe, mpaka wakiumizana tena wao kwa wao. Halo,
majenzi, hatutaki maandamano, hatutaki kukufa.
Ni nani anapiga nani?
Nikutumia kwa nasi. Come. By the time ninatuma kwa simu si hiyo leo.
Mtumie. Hata munzo wametanganyikana. Haijulikani.
Mara wanasema jega simeisha kuja hivi. Ndudi anasema anataka maandamano, wengine wanasema hawataki.
07 41 82 27 28
sisi tunalinda Kenya.
Oya. Sasa mimi nasaidiana.
Bro.
Mimi nasaidiana. Na mimi niko bro.
Hiyo si mzuri yake. Ipate ya black. Rudia 07 41 82 27 38.
Yeah,
41 82 27 38. Nitoke 40. Utupe ngapi?
Simchukue mimi. Hawa si wamenyang'anya hata majina.
Utachukua moja mbili. Utachukua moja.
Kwa. Haya. Wewe basi.
Wapiti kwa lipo. Dada, maliza hiyo shughuli za miti na. Wakinyang'anya wachoka. Lakini wanafika wapi? Ndio nimeona pia ni makoroji. Jichunge, yani that's what I'm saying. So akabongo hadi atakuja hapo. Kama ni kusenta alipei kama kusaidia alipei alisikia alia haona mali mapande amesimama kwa sababu kukimbia na yeye mahali sienda ndio wako huko wengi unaendanga mahali unajua wamepotea. Watu wa miti wote wamepotea.
Na yule mzee anasaidiwa asiaoni.
Nani? Yule wa miti anaambia waweke miti chini na anakata kitampata. Uchunge hiyo kitu ijalipuka. Haina pini. Hiyo haina pini, inapolipukia inakufanya mikono kama kitu kingine. Oya. Anang'ang'ana nayo.
Nishike hivi uone nichukue clip hiyo.
So guys, karibuni sana. Thank you so much. The best thing now you can do for me is to send hizo gift zenyu. Mtume hizo gift zenyu. Mtume hizo gift zenyu leo. So kuna group za county post yenye inasema that hiyo kitu haijalipuka.
Italipuka kwa mkono wako. Acha nayo.
Amkusaidiwa.
Bro. Ndio kurapcha. Sasa isha katika waizi chukua.
Police are now engaging the protesters who have made all this is happening.
Watu wa miti wote wamepotea.
Mmoja ndo
huyo ajui anaenda wapi. Anapata amekutanishwa hapa katikati, amepigwa.
gani hawa watu wako nayo? Unaona hii?
vizuri bana tu. Waseme venye wanataka. Bana, sakata kwani uridhiki na hiyo uongozi tulikupea bana bro. Unalipa vijana kupiga vijana wenzetu bana na tunaandamana. Hapa, wala huko juu kwanza. Alafu ndio wa kwanza. Kwanza tena. Sakaja. Sakaja pia tena na yeye. Wale mnige hapo kumboja na kaeni. Hata tunakuja kwa ofisi Sakaja.
Wenda kumakwe, kuma mamako.
teammates as watchers. So we have
wanapiga wenzao pia gasba. Polisi wanapiga wenzao. Hata ndio wenyewe wamechanganyikiwa. Unajua wale playlist bado hajaachiliwa. Wao wanakuja saa 9. Polisi. Kuna wale saa 9 sasa. Plain clothes. No.
Asanteni sana kwa kuona support.
Welcome back. You're still watching tonight, and we have the special coverage of the budget 2025-2026 with my experts, Sunday Main, Dr. Abraham Rugo, and Bilo Kero. And we had gone to the extent of touching on some of the allocations. Dr. Rugo, on the question of education, because yes, it's expensive, and you had the cabinet secretary saying that for the past couple of years, the government has been paying for examination fees for children, regardless of where they go to school, regardless of the financial status of their parents. Now, the past few years also, to be specific, since 2022, you've seen a shift on how education is financed. You have the university funding model that has been controversial, and now you see this question of examination fees. What are we getting into?
It's interesting. Some allow me to start from just a bit of numbers. So our population right now is about 1 million. Couple of times.
Watu ambao iko wanabebeanga hapa. So makarao ni kama wamevuruta watu wakawaleta hapa karibu. Na sasa wajamaa wanasema watoe hao watu hapa wanawaharibia kazi. Wanawaharibia shughuli zao. Watu wa pikipiki wamesema hawa watu watoke hapa, wanawaharibia kazi. Ndio hao.
40% of those are because of school fees. We are going to drive to that already. What we are seeing is that in the education sector, you have more and more increasingly children who are not able to go to school. And a big driver is income.
Ni maandamano. Bravin Ojwang, ni maandamano ya Albert Ojwang. Justice must prevail.
But these are 1.3 million is not a small number. When you think about it. After you've made a lot of progress over the years. But let's go to the other side. Increasingly, you have teachers. But you also have competition, which basically is supposed to be
wasakaji wa chakula wameshindwa kutoa hii kitu hapa.
So the point I'm trying to go to is that the bills in competition. When it goes basically politicians are saying these are the amounts of money that the competition. I think we have to influence just by the system of children. So what we are facing right now is a one. We have more and more families that are separation. Now remember, this is also coming in a context where incomes have been really important, have actually been declining. Job opportunities in that. Second, you have a lot of duplication of financing that is coming into the education sector. And this is what I mean. Especially in high school, you have all these bursaries. We did a study. My colleague Naima was here in the morning and she broke it a bit down and just put it on the case. That 61% of the bursaries are outside the education sector. What that means, they are in the hands of different political offices, MG, CDF, Women Rep, County,
different institutions, then other even offices, office of the president. They're all these different, but they are not coordinated. We have not even added the non-government organizations that also sponsor children. So what we are facing is that on one hand, money that should be going to schools is not going there at the time it should be going. Two, there's a lot of duplication and of course very difficult to track, which then would mean that there's a lot of corruption going on or slippages, in terms of who is being paid for, how we are able to but there's a bigger concern, which has to do with quality. So we have increased the amount of money going to TSC, but our teachers are actually going to class and teaching. But even when they go to class and teaching, do they have the necessary equipment? Think about the competency-based education.
Siwezi nika-receive call, guys. Siwezi nika-receive call.
It's supposed to have schools with computers. It's supposed to have, I look at the assignments that my children come with, and I ask myself, do all the children actually out there have this kind of, do they have internet? Are they able to print? And are the labs equipped? Because it's supposed to be hands-on. So I think, for me, I worry that we are actually staring at a declining quality of leadership, by and by. Right? And the last point to say, and while in the midst of all that, you also don't have clarity of what is coming next. Right now we have a crisis of grade 10s, who are going to be coming in. And we have a crisis of grade 9s, because even still it's not clear whether they're in primary school or high school. That's a story for another day. But it's not clear when you say, for instance, they are going to be the tracks and children are going to be taking. A lot of schools don't have arts and sports track. So that's for me the biggest concern. Right. A funding one, but also money. So as you talk about this continued differentiation of children, at a time that you also see, like he says, quality going down to an extent that even when they were looking at places to cut, Parliament cut a whole 570 million shillings were supposed to go into capacity building of teachers. What then are we doing to the public education sector? Because it appears that the focus is just how much, but not more what is being offered to students.
There are a number of things from my experience. Former lecture that I've seen, starting with the capitation. Money comes to a school. It goes to that management team of the school. The principal plus the other members of the board. Where you would be surprised, but quite often some of that money is not used for whatever it is supposed to be used. Because this is just a group of 4 or 5 people. They don't know what to do with that. And so if this is why now we start having pending bills coming up in the Ministry of Education. Use the money, then liability. They've seen people doing that in the ministry, they're doing health ministry. Everyone sees what's happening, so everyone wants to do the same thing.
Oliver Angela, thank you so much. What was subscribe?
Some say this.
What was subscribe?
Every leader who has come to power in this country has an opportunity to deal with the single most important problem in this country. So that when you say we are giving 700 billion to Ministry of Education, how much will they and how much has been based on the settlement that government has made in the last 2 years, nearly a third of every allocation, which is the separation, the state efficiency, and so forth. It's beyond the ministry. So that the question of really these challenges will persist.
Okay. On that question about differentiation of children, is it necessary?
Well, some I don't think it should be, but based on what I've heard today, it seems like that is the role of some, and that will continue until as here I said that if there is a change and new legislators come into power, then they do have an opportunity to make that change. But until that happens, I guess that will continue. But can it be done away with? I think it's not possible.
Let's move on to, because again, look at the public goods that government is supposed to offer. The public goods, food taxes, bonds has been taken. They say securitization of the 7 shillings per litre. If you're talking about health, we have shift taking place. If it's education, we're talking about what we are now going to shift in terms of financing of examination fees. It has the funding models, we have alternative models that we found. If we're talking about markets, which is through the taxes that are collected. Then you have, if it's water, most neighborhoods you find that, especially in Nairobi, because of the challenge of water, they have to depend on water bowsers or private boreholes. So what are we getting into? Because you still raise taxes and other revenues up to 3% to procure for themselves.
I think Sam, when you look at it from a wider lens perspective, and I think listening into this discussion, especially that's coming out here, is really around accountability and transparency. You talked about the housing levy. Yes, that was a big hue and cry. You remember how the legislation had been. Do you see the housings? Question. Yeah. There was some point in time that you saw.
Guys, you can support the live as well. As we continue watching, make sure you support the live.
There's no avenue of using those funds. So I think for me, yes, there are those maintenance levies that are being collected for road. If the money is being collected, how is it being spent? And until that accountability is not taken, there's no transparency, we have a problem. Kenya is because it was used to repay loans. Which loans? The loans are now pretty high, 11 trillion, 1 trillion interest. Commissioning review by the regime. We hope that report, when it's come out, it should be made public and it should be, available for scrutinization on how exactly the money collected, which currently go to more or less a consolidated fund, then being used
to introducing new taxes that don't necessarily go to the consolidated fund. Right. So I think it's important for us to appreciate that the government is in a big. And allow me just to run you through some quickly. If you look at the projected revenue, which basically is expecting 2760, let's use that as a 2760 billion, which is 2.7 trillion. If you remove the interest plus 1423, if you remove county transfers of 4 or 5, you remain with 1080. If you remove all government salaries of 900 billion, that is 19.
Watching live.
Now that's where
thank you so much.
And this is where then you bring in the next source of income, which is the charges that government will be levying for every service you get, which basically means, because we are projecting a 17% increment to 550, you basically are saying that you expect to raise more from Kenyans accessing services. You bring back the education discussion that we were talking about, where you're saying you want parents to do more cost share. I agree. Generally, the point you're trying to make is that Kenyans have to take care of every service they want. Remember, here, I have not included infrastructure, because in salaries, the only figure that is there is the salaries for TC. We have not included all these state-owned acknowledgement that we, and of course, I hope time will allow, we can talk a bit more about the securitization and different, because that has to, and what the C actually be moving to more privatization of what should be public goods and services. So in the way for service, we are going to be paying for services more and more. Now remember, these are services which the base mechanism of provision is we have paid it already with which has bought bonds. To earn government income. I think for me that's a very worrying trend, because then it means a discussion has to be held if I have to pay taxes and spend, whether directly or indirectly, that becomes a concern. And
The last point I wanted to say here is corruption. The amount of money we are losing.
Yeah,
today, the CS, I was very surprised. He didn't mention the word corruption unless I didn't hear it. He talked about, these are the things that unless you deal with corruption, unless you deal with abuse of office, unless you deal, he mentioned politicization, that was a big indication of what it means is that at the end of the day, if you're not careful, then you are not necessarily improving public services. You are increasing inequality because remember the 40% thing then it becomes so therefore the end is that you actually increase inequality. That just gets you into perspective. I've actually checked the statement of the Cabinet Secretary. He mentioned corruption 3 times, but in this context, improving governance and sustaining the fight against corruption is a central one. Then it says to enhance good governance, intensify the fight against corruption, and entrench integrity and accountability in public service delivery, and prepare for 25 billion shillings for the ethics and anti-corruption. So I think I should break here. Stay with us because we will come back. We'll be talking about the money spending habits of the government. Recently we've been seeing the empowerment programs of at least 10 million shillings is spent by different Kenyans who have to dig deeper to finance not just the taxes but the services.
These guys are crazy, man.
Welcome back. You're still watching tonight on our conversation on budget 2025-2026. We had gotten to the point of talking about some of the public goods or the public services that you're supposed to be accessing, but now having to pay more for them despite having paid the taxes. And Mheshimiwa Kevo, talk to us about because of a country that has to wait for so long, especially the county governments and of course some different state agencies, they have to wait for so long to receive the exchequer releases. But in the same period, you're seeing political leaders moving from constituency to constituency, village to village, dancing and giving money, dubbed empowerment. Where is this money coming from, and how do we tidy that up so that Kenyans will continue to pay taxes, because now it's becoming quite mandatory and enforceable, but value for money still not being said?
Well, I think there is always misplaced priorities. The top priority of any government is the politics. Will they keep power? Will they get back to power? That's the priority. And so money will be given in terms of exchequer. Have more clout than you when it comes to accessing exchequer. So you will find genuine ministry or government that really requires exchequer. They don't get it. But someone who does not, it's going to become intimidated because of so it's unfortunate that you find that all the money that are always reported.
Ngoja kunywa maji. Usioshe ruhusa ni kuacha mbaya.
Kuna ndimu. We are considering over 20-30 billion this year. But what actually gets really fast and the amount of money that we have.
Tuko pause kidogo tujaje.
So I think it boils down to the issue of governance. Never mind what the law says. I will not be able to check. So the county governments back noise and they threaten and eventually they get replaced. That's because county governments are institutions. So ultimately they'll delay, but they'll get their money. But a ministry will not. And the prime minister, because you will not get the money they can be advised, they are not politicians. So this unfortunately is a very common thing, and it is very bad. And it gives an impression that, you know, CS goes around in these hard times. and this is why they are selling government institution through security. And I mentioned this, 65 billion areas where governments because there's less accountability there, transparency in that area. So
there's nothing Parliament can do because
Parliament can do a lot of things, but who are parliamentarians? They're members of the political party. Parliament today, Parliament in the 19th century, a lot of things have changed globally. Because those were the days when the members of the bench were significant. After all these political party disciplines, so you can't do much. You try to memorize and you lose some of the privileges you have in Parliament. When you are a high-ranking member of Parliament, so members of Parliament tend to, to a fine line,
And Dr. Ugo, so the deficit, like you said, goes up to 9.24. If you look at the public debt, the government secretary is saying that he's waiting for the general to give a report. Not exactly the results, but at the same time, deficit is declared, borrowing is declared at a time that the Central Bank of Kenya is worrying about the best rate. So it is about going ahead and doing this because on one hand, government is saying that public debt to increasing it, the deficit. So because there is no unfortunately dealing with expenditure, it's actually expenditure because we just started when on the eve of submission of the budget. And I think it's important to clarify here that Kenyans need to know that the budget was submitted in Parliament a month and a half ago, 30th of April. But you will remember that on the eve of that submission, there were changes that were made to cut about 126 billion. The budget that the Budget and Appropriations Committee submitted back after public participation and engagement, we increased that budget back by about 26 billion. Now, our debt is largely driven by deficits that increase in the year. So we start with a figure, like last year we started with a figure of about 820.
CBD mambo hulai.
As you know, Supplementary 2 actually did expand. When we reduced the targets for revenue, we did not reduce, rationally, when you reduce the targets for revenue, you should reduce the targets for expenditure. Now, because there's no, unfortunately, we don't see any appetite for expenditure rationalization and changes. We in my opinion, I think we are heading to a place where one, we are likely not to be able to You think so? The reason why I think so is the numbers are just if today your balance sheet in your house or in your business looked like the one I have just told you, where you're already starting at a negative before you have provided paid school fees and the like. 1097, 1.1 trillion is interest payments. 851 of that it's to the domestic market. Where is government going? It's saying we want to borrow. Initially it was 876 as of 2 days ago. Today it's gone to 923. 630 of that will be borrowed locally. Yep. We are already saying that the employment creation is actually on a decline because a private sector that are supposed to be creating employment is not necessarily expanding. Cost of credit, and it's on record, cost of credit has been going up. Even when CBK reduced the rate, it did not necessarily reduce the cost of credit. And government already is borrowing so much. So even with the CBK, the central bank lowering the CBR rate yesterday by 25 basis points, basically means that government is likely to be now accessing credit in the local market at a much cheaper rate. Now, we are already defaulting. I think it's important to say that. Why do I say it? You see, there are two ways in which you default. You either default on your obligations to provide public services, of which we have figures of about 706 billion in pending bills.
Right.
And the CS today spent quite a bit of time talking about pending bills because he acknowledges that is taking critical operation income and capital from small. In fact, he said we are going to prioritize the small, the medium, just mixing them, the medium, small. I'm also mixing them up. The micro, small, and medium enterprises. SMEs. MSMEs. Yeah. That to those ones. Acknowledging that pending bills is a big challenge.
Yeah.
But Sam, let me draw you to another number. When you look at the state-owned enterprises, I prefer entities, they also owe about 1.1 trillion. And we have the schedule that was presented together with the if you put those two figures, you're already at 1.8 trillion. If you put those as obligations that are owed, those are not pending bills. These are loans that they owe to the national government.
Yeah.
Which definitely should be money that should be circulating. Of the figure that I talked about, the 1097, that is interest, there is a principal payment. Remember, for every borrowing you make, there is a principal payment.
Yep.
What is the principal payment that is due right now? About 600 billion. I mean, isn't that already a recipe for insolvency? If you were to look at, so that then...
And how will you finance that principal repayment?
Sorry?
How will you finance that principal repayment?
You have to get it from somewhere. So what do? You borrow. So this is what has been happening.
Yeah.
Because of the numbers I explained, this 923, remember development spending is 702 billion.
Yeah.
So already you have 200 billion on top, which is actually going to be recurrent. What we know, and I wish the treasury people were here to at least clarify this, is that we actually borrowing to finance past loans. We did that with the Eurobond last year. We a bond that a loan that we took at 6%, we borrowed at 10% to pay it off. And therefore, but it will come to a point where, after doing this branch, Tala, Fuliza, you finally get your hands tied because you're then not able to provide public services. And that's what I'm saying. I feel like we are already defaulting. All these pending bills is a default.
For sure.
It's only that we are not treating them as a fast charge because we still want to look like a function. It's interesting actually. Last week, allow me just to say this is the last thing. Last 2 weeks ago, the World Bank launched the Public Finance Review report. And during that launch, the representative spent some time talking about why default is a road we must not entertain. But they give scenarios, and I don't have time for that. The same week, the president said we are not going to default, which then tells you that there is already a concern that our fiscal space has shrunk, is getting tighter and tighter. Something will have to give at some point.
Right.
Either we don't provide more services, or we then decide how do we restructure. Let me use a softer word.
Yeah.
How do we restructure our obligations? And people do restructure their obligations. Either you take cheaper loan and offset the expensive loan, or you increase the term,
right?
Or that, or swap as they were. But the critical part is, this time you are going to buy when you are doing all this restructuring. What do you do with it?
Okay.
So a long answer, but I think it's important to expound.
Sure. And Honorable Kero, so then, because the government, and I've had this for a very long time, the economy remains resilient, has been resilient. I've had that since, I think, the cabinet secretary for Treasury, at that time, Henry Rotich, back in 2013, thereabout. Even today, I had it. Then fiscal consolidation, cutting expenditure as well as raising revenue, or both. What must we do? Because yes, saying that we're not going to introduce new taxes, but in the other finance bill, there are a few things that we are seeing. How do we salvage the situation while also reflecting on what Dr. Rugo is talking about with the public debt?
Well, we've answered it. I don't know how many times you want us to answer. We said the government must rationalize its expenditure. That we must cut down the size of government. Look, it never, I don't know, but there seems to be an impression in this country that government must be seen to be doing everything. Look, when they came up with the housing thing, we were here, we discussed and we said, look, nobody's saying we don't need houses, but that can be done by the private sector. incentivize them, let them do it. Must the government do everything? They don't have to do everything. But if you say that, look, we are the experts, you must give us all the money, I will tell you what needs to be done. Every day you're expanding government. They're doing everything. It can't work. And so what will happen is, you're killing enterprise. Let me tell you, today businesses are suffering. So, the amount of money businesses need from government is not just the 570 that he talked about of pending bills. That's only national government. Then you add a similar number from the counties, maybe. Then you have refunds for VATs of 150 billion. Then now when you add the state corporations, I mean, you have over 2 trillion belonging to businesses that this government is not giving people. And these things, how much more impact would it make on the GDP? It's huge. So I think the issue really for me is, yes, the government talks about, fiscal consolidation and all those things, but the bottom line is, unless there's a fundamental change in the mindset of the leadership that, look, we can do things differently. We must not do things the same way that we've been doing. The government must be looking for revenue all the time. And, and revenue all the time, you can't balance it. You can't see it. But they keep repeating, by the way, on national TV that for every 65% of our revenue is being spent on servicing loans. They keep repeating. Yeah. But then if that is the case, then why are you expanding government? Why are you putting us into, you're digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper. So I think the thing that the government needs to do is, the most important priority is rationalize